Welcome back. Mike Blewitt at the DFS Players Conference. I'm here with my co-host Tony Cincotta, and we are welcoming with us Jarad Wilk from the New York Post. Jarad, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So here we are, DFS Players Conference. Obviously a big week in daily fantasy sports. Announcements, news. Obviously we're trying to support the cause to keep daily fantasy sports alive, and you can go to a website called Fantasy Sports for All. But I guess first just sort of give us your take on what went down in New York this week and the challenge that New York daily fantasy players may face.
You know, I know they filed the lawsuit today to DraftKings and FanDuel to keep fantasy keep daily alive in New York, which I fully support. Obviously, as someone who is in the fantasy business. But as far as what goes on from here, you know, it's just a matter of whether the Attorney General is willing to listen to this, or, you know, it can go either way. But I'm hoping that, you know, we can keep daily fantasy going in New York, because obviously it's a huge business. If you see all the people that are here and all the people that are supporting this and that were out at the rally this morning, I mean, you got a ton of people in New York that are ticked off about this, that are really upset. And when you have such a big business, I mean, you have to, you know, I think it just makes no sense not to keep it going.
Here's the thing, is I think that I live in an isolated world. I play fantasy sports. I work in fantasy sports. I've been doing this for 10 years. Do you think the common guy that works 9 to 5 really cares whether daily fantasy sports is legal or not?
Whether the regular guy, I mean, you know, like me, I play, but I'm not putting like a ton of money or a ton of, you know, ton into it, but I enjoy it. And I think, you know, a lot of the regular 9 to 5 guys are the same as me. They're putting a few bucks in, and they enjoy it. It makes their Sundays better. It makes their Sundays more exciting. I think, I think some people will be upset by it, and that's just me. You know, I think people will be upset by it.
That's curious. It's a good question, though, to explore that a little bit. I think there's a certain percentage of people that would be put off by suddenly being involved in what is deemed by someone else to be illegal. But I think there's plenty of people that if operationally they could get it done, even if it was declared illegal by one government official, I think people would still continue to play, don't you?
I look at it like this. If I'm a guy that's not involved in fantasy, right? I'm just an average guy. I work for a living. I have 3 kids, and my kids go to school. I want anything legal that will bring in tax dollars to my state, and something that will absolutely help the rest of us out. And I look at it, and it's fantasy sports. The part that I get pissed off about is that we have congressmen and senators put bills in front of every state, every single state, that go 2 years and never get looked at. Yet this Attorney General starts looking at something on October 6th and deems this to be illegal on November 10th. I mean, there's no other laws that get enacted on that fast. Is it really that bad? And that's what drives me crazy. That's what makes me, though, as a guy that was involved in daily fantasy sports, saying maybe I need to pay attention to other issues that go on in the world, because I know from doing my research that most bills never get acted on, yet this guy chose to enact on something in 40 days.
No, it was like, I think it was the presidential debate where Chris Christie said, you know, are we really talking about fantasy football? Like, there are much more important things in the world than fantasy football. And why this, you know, suddenly got, you know, streamlined and everything, it's crazy. It really is.
There were absolutely politicians on that stage talking about a topic that they had no idea what they were talking about, which, frankly, doesn't necessarily preclude them from talking about other more serious topics that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. I'm looking at it this way, and I think there's been a lot of misinformation. You're in the newspaper business. Now, you used to write articles about who to play on Sunday, and we used to talk about who to play on Sunday. Now I'm answering questions about things I have no idea about, like, can I put in a lineup, Tony, in Wyoming this Sunday? And I have no idea. How is it affecting your work at the New York Post?
You know, I'm basically just trying to help them find players that are upset by this and everything. And, it's just increased discussion. I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to in the office on a daily basis, we're all sports guys. And a good portion of us, Drew Loftus, who writes the fantasy column included, we're all upset. We all play daily. We all like it, and we all partake in it. But, that's the only thing that affects us. Like, I know Scott and Drew, they think of how, whether they should write their daily lineup this week. So it makes us look at how we have to cover it now. So now should we include these daily lineups, since now this might be taken away from us? But we're still going to do the daily stuff. And, from that perspective, you just kind of go back business as usual. You can't really necessarily, until they say this is done 100%. I mean, I know there's this leeway period right now. So hopefully we'll just keep going about business as usual.
So to switch gears for a sec, your personal relationship with DFS, obviously you've been a fantasy sports player for some time. How long have you been playing DFS, and do you venture across all sports, MLB, NBA, NFL? What is your sort of sweet spot and how you play?
I started playing, I believe, last football season, probably like week 4, week 5. I heard everyone in the office talking about it. It's like, oh, we play DFS. And I'm like, all right, I'll join in. And then so I started with football, and then I got involved with NBA. And I did well with NBA. And then when baseball season came around, I'm like, all right, I'm the fantasy baseball guy at the Post. I'm going to try my hand at baseball. So I tried that. So those are I dabbled in hockey a little bit, but I feel like I can't do anything where I can't pronounce half the names. I'm just like
Tony.
No, being a talk show host, I know what he's talking about. We're speaking to Jarad Wilk, New York Post, Mike Blewitt, Tony Cincotta here at the Daily Fantasy Sports Players Conference. This is crazy, right? You talk about an industry that's unbelievable. This was a startup business by FanDuel in 2009, which should be being celebrated right now in an economy where everybody's trying to get work and everybody's trying to make a buck. And 6 years into it, FanDuel's on every single commercial on TV. They're in the Madison Square Garden. They're in the Barclays Center. If you had a startup business, this should be celebrated. And yet we're at a daily fantasy players conference. We have people all over the United States flying in to talk about daily fantasy sports. And unfortunately, this week, we don't even have the opportunity to celebrate because we're all worried that we can't play tomorrow.
It should be celebrated. I mean, any business that starts from the ground up as a small thing, as a small entity, and grows should be celebrated, especially one that is in a community like this. I mean, you have all these players here, and you have tons of fantasy players that aren't even here, that whether they play daily or season long. And it's a community. It's not, it's nothing, it's not what it's made out to be by the Attorney General. It's not. It's 100% a great community of great people. I mean, I got involved with Fantasy Sports Network with you guys, and we have this partnership with Scott, and it's been unbelievable, the reception, just in less than a year that I've been dealing with, talking with you guys, that it's been an unbelievable relationship and an unbelievable, the people I've met, friendliest, kindest people, and it's like we're being targeted, and it's just not, it's not fair.
So, going forward, obviously we're going to have to see how the dust settles, certainly here in New York. It's interesting because you're mentioning regarding the Post, and you have to do business as usual. You really will have to, right? Because you have readers in Connecticut and New Jersey and certainly other areas of the country that will still look to you for that advice. But I guess most importantly for us, and we've mentioned the website a number of times, fantasysportsforall.com. You should go on there, and if you're interested in keeping DFS going, sign that petition. But, what do you think you could do from a personal standpoint? You obviously have a pretty large voice at the Post. What do you think you could do to maybe get the word out to sort of, fight the good fight for DFS?
I still think, like with Drew and Scott right now, because they're handling the fantasy football, I think putting in the daily lineups every week and just keep putting them in, not just because it's something they've been doing or, just because it may eventually be, diminished in New York or out in New York, I think keep putting it in, keep putting it, keep writing it. And I think, having more editorials, more columns that that are pro fantasy and everything, and show that this is, something that is valuable and that should be around and should be allowed. I think, stuff like that, but continuing to do it. And really, I don't think changing, eliminating it is basically saying, all right, we're giving up on that. I don't think you should give up on that. I think you have to continue to go about business as usual and not, and just not ignore the fact, ignore the fact that, it's coming down in New York.
Speaking of Jarad Wilk of the New York Post, Jarad, before I let you go,
yeah.
I tell you, the greatest sign that I saw today while you guys were out there protesting was DFS, a game of skill, politics not.
That's a great sign.
Stuff. I love it.
I hope one of our photographers got that today, because that would be fantastic.
Great stuff, Jarad Wilk, New York Post. We're going to wrap things up. Stay tuned for more on the Fantasy Sports Network.